Chair Rios, we are now streaming live.
Thank you. Board members, turn your mics on, please. And good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Historic Districts Review Board. I will now call this meeting to order. Melissa, may we have a roll call, please?
Chair Rios,
Here.
Vice Chair Guida,
Here.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Here.
Member Beachside,
Here.
Member Bienvenue,
Here.
Member Mather,
Here.
Member Baldo.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Melissa. Any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Chair Rios, quite a few, unfortunately. So item number 3, case number 2023-7314-HDRB 918D as in David, Acequia Madre was going to be postponed to October 24th. Item number 5 on the agenda, 2023-6565 HDRB 1600 Canyon Road, and item number 6, 2023-6490 HDRB 1596 Canyon Road will be moved to November 14th. Item number 7, 815 East Palace, number 30, case number 2023-7285 HDRB is to be postponed to October 24th. And item number 8, 2023-7323 HDRB 275 East Alameda Street, postponed to October 24th.
Thank you, Heather. Any further changes?
Madam
No,
Chair.
thank goodness.
Is there a motion to approve? Yes, Member Rita.
Just a question about the agenda. Heather, I realize that we've kind of cut the list of cases down a bit, but in my memory, when we have an informational session, we have folks in the room, we usually do it first. I'm wondering if I might make a motion to move the discussion item to the front of the agenda before new business.
We have a motion on the floor to move the discussion item to prior to hearing any cases. Is that what you're indicating, Member Guida?
It is indeed.
Is there a second to this motion?
A second.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Beachside,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue, Member
Yes.
Guida,
Yes.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Baldo.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much. We have minutes of,
Madam Chair, we need to approve the agenda.
pardon?
We need to approve the
Oh,
agenda.
yes, and please.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as just amended by staff and by the board.
Aguilar Medrano seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Beachside,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue,
Yes.
Member Guida,
Yes.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Baldo.
Yes.
The motion has, Member Aguilar Medrano.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you, Melissa. We have minutes of September 12th, 2023. Before I ask for changes to any of these minutes, I noticed, Melissa, that we do not have included comments made by the public. It was just indicated that they were for a project or against a project. Can you let us know what's going on there?
That's back to the city clerk wanting us to do summary minutes. And so that's the reason for it, so that I can provide summary minutes. But it's up to the board if you would like me to be more, we could talk to the city clerk to see.
This has to go, is this the city clerk's decision?
It was her decision to allow summary.
Or
minutes.
if the board objects to that, what happens then, Heather?
Chair Rios, certainly the board can make note of that, and we can, their wishes as a board, and we can collaborate with the clerk. I would suggest a vote in this particular case.
I think it's important to include the comments that were made in detail. Do I hear from other board members? Member Guida?
Just a question about maybe this decision. Is there a relationship between the city clerk's decision and perhaps the YouTube footage becoming part of the archive or the official record, or?
Chair Rios, Member Guida, I believe that the YouTube is definitely part of the official record and is kept as part of that. And so part of that rationale is that anybody could go to YouTube and see the video as it relates to a particular case if they wish. And of course, we also have recordings of it as well. So if it is a pleasure of the board, though, and there's a perceived need, we certainly can try to discuss this with the clerk.
And I have also noted at the end of every, Madam Chair, at the end of every case, I've noted where on the YouTube video, you can find the actual hearing of the case. So it's got the actual like hour and minute where the case begins and where the case ends. If as part of the record, but like Heather said, if you'd like to note, for the record that, we discussed this with the clerk, we can do
Yes,
that.
I do realize that you can get a full copy of the entire minutes, but I think it's important to include them in these minutes, in the written minutes. Any other, yes, member Benvenu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, as we talked about the last time when this decision was made to change the minute format, I strongly disagree with the current format. I think it's extremely important that we have full written minutes that record these meetings for a number of reasons. One is that these cases can and do go to the governing body. I wouldn't expect the governing body to be looking up YouTubes to understand how the board reached the decisions that they reached or what public comments were being made. The same is true if the case is appealed to district court. I would definitely not expect the district court judge to be looking at YouTube to try to understand that. It's very traditional to have a written record of decisions in a quasi judicial body such as this board. I don't think that, just as audio recordings that have always been used in the past are not a substitute, but only in addition to the written minutes. The same is even more true in my mind to a video recording, which is harder to access. So for all those reasons, and also these are precedential decisions that we make in my mind. And it's also important for the public to be able to understand how the board reached its decisions in these cases. And the actual findings and conclusions are, of course, the most important aspect in understanding that reasoning, but the minutes can also inform that understanding. So I would move when discussion is closed on this item, I would definitely be in favor of moving that the city clerk be informed that this board has a strong desire to return to full written minutes as they were previously.
Madam Chair. I believe there's a rule that controls this.
Attorney
There is-
Rubeline.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. The rules and procedures for city committees that were adopted there in 3 resolutions in 1984, 1990, and 2009. There's actually a provision about this. And I believe that the decision to have summary minutes is consistent with this. It reads, and I'm reading from Article 13, in accordance with the State Open Meetings Act, which is Section 10-15-1. Any board, commission, or other policy-making body shall keep written minutes of all its meetings. The minutes shall include at a minimum the date, time, and place of the meeting, the names of members in attendance and those absent, the substance of the proposals considered, and a record of any decisions and votes taken, which show how each member voted. All minutes shall be open to the public. Draft minutes shall be prepared within 10 working days after the meeting. So there is nothing that requires the minutes to contain more than what is set forth in statute and what's set forth in the resolution controlling committees and agendas. I know sometimes it is helpful to have a verbatim transcript, which I think can be ordered, but as far as the minutes go, the summary minutes that we've been discussing are consistent with the rules controlling committees and meetings and the Open Meetings Act.
Despite that being said, I think that Member Benvenu made a motion. And
I would just add to that those are the minimal requirements. And what we're saying is that we would ask the clerk to return to the minutes if the determination is made that, there's a refusal based on the city taking the position that they only want to do what's minimally required, then we'll see what we do then.
thank you, Member Benvenu. Restate your motion, please.
I move that the city clerk be informed that the board is of the opinion that they desire to return to not verbatim minutes, but the same type of full minutes that were previously in place and were being approved on a regular basis by the board.
Is there a second to this motion?
Beach, I will second.
Roll call vote, please, Melissa?
Member Beachside,
Yes.
Member Guida,
No?
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Valdo,
Yes.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Bienvenu.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much. Now we go to the minutes of September 12th, 2023. Changes to any of these, to this minutes? Anyone? It appears there are no changes. Is there a motion to approve?
Guida moves to approve the minutes.
Beach, I seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Guida,
Yes.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Valdo,
Yes.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Abstain.
Member Bienvenu,
Abstain.
and Member Beachside.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. I'm just going to point out the members that abstained are abstaining because they were not present during that hearing. We have 6 findings of fact and conclusions of law. Changes to any of these? There appear to be no changes. I will entertain a motion.
Guida moves to approve the findings of fact and conclusions of law.
Beach, I seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Valdo,
Yes.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Abstain.
Member Bienvenu,
Abstain.
Member Beachside,
Yes.
Member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Matters from the public. Is there anyone in here that wishes to come to the podium and speak on anything that may be both related to this board or preservation or design? Yes, Mr. McDonald. Good evening. Is that mic on?
How about that?
I think that's a little better.
I'm here because, as you all know, the Santa Fe Land Development Code is looking to be rewritten, and the Historic Districts Code is part of that code. The Historic Districts Code is, I think, more than any other part of the code, the Land Development Code, very specific to Santa Fe. And I think it's probably more than any other part of the code, because I've seen an awful lot of it, needing not just an overhaul, but just a reworking from the ground up. And I don't think you deal with the problems of the code. Every 2 weeks you're here. It's important that we have a deep discussion about this. And I think that you board members are the ones who can take a leadership role there. That it, along with Heather and Gary and Lanny, Ramon, and members of the community who have worked with the historic code. Any thoughts on how this could happen? But I feel like the leadership comes from you.
I think that discussion is going to take place. Correct, Heather? Would you update us on what is happening in reference to the code?
Yes, Chair Rios, I was just making a note to mention under staff communications. So with reference to the consultant team, Clarion Associates, they came to Santa Fe last week, and we had a study session presentation to the Planning Commission and several different meetings, including the Technical Advisory Committee, as well as the Community Advisory Committee, and 2 members of the board participated in each of those different meetings. And we also met with different stakeholders to talk about the particular changes to the code. An assessment report has been issued, and that assessment report really tries to lay a roadmap as to how we're going to pursue the next steps on the zoning code. So phase 1 is really intended to reorganize and update the zoning code format so that it's more user-friendly and, understandable. So, and then the phase two will be dealing with those key issues like density, like zoning code, districts and the permitted uses and all of that, and others that have been identified. And in fact, I'm going to be emailing this assessment report to the board members, and I was planning on maybe discussing it at the end of October, just to see what your input might be at a study session at the end of the agenda.
Heather, are any more comments being accepted?
Madam Chair, yes, that is correct.
And up to when
comments
will
as
they be accepted?
Yeah, as they relate to the assessment report, there's a portal that's open, and you can comment on the sfldcupdate.com webpage. I'll double check that webpage, but web address. But yes, there's the opportunity to go directly to the webpage relating to the zoning code update and see all of the materials and provide comments.
And eventually it'll come before the public. And when is that scheduled? Do we have a timeline for that?
Chair Rios, I believe for the phase one cleanup, we are shooting for the first quarter of 2024.
So I'm aware of all of that. I went to the meeting last Thursday and spoke to this issue. My concern is you have the Technical Advisory Working Group, TOG, and you have the Citizens Advisory Working Group, COG. I understand Member Bescheid, you're on the technical group, Member Guida on the Citizens Group. The historic code, I think, needs a very specific, it needs a lot of attention, not just a subgroup of the TOG or the COG, and that it's the Clarion Associates from Denver. I don't think they have any idea what the Santa Fe Historic Code is about. I don't think you could really understand it. You folks understand it and understand some of the problems. I think the historic code in particular needs a deeper look and a deeper conversation. There's a lot of disagreement about what the code should be, but let's talk about it. I think that's really important. I think if the Santa Fe Historic Code was an airplane, you would not set foot on that thing. I guess I've said enough, but please, it would be helpful if we could talk more about this.
Thank you very much for your comments, Will. Mr. Martinez.
Hello, my name is Richard Martinez. I have a case that's being postponed tonight. I just want to mention that case was actually, I submitted it on August 14th, and it was scheduled for tonight, and now it's not. So it's, since I submitted, it's going to be 2 months since for this submittal. For this hearing, and we only heard that there was a problem today with this submittal. On another note, at the Midtown campus, the old College of Santa Fe, we have been trying, as architects, have been trying to make sure that the Philip Register buildings are recognized for their historic nature. And I understand that the city has not decided exactly what's going to happen, but those are really important buildings. And there's not that many of them. And it would be wonderful if new uses can be found for those buildings. I'm less concerned with the Legoretta buildings because the city has announced that SFAI, which I'm on the board of, is going to be organizing the Midtown Arts and Design Alliance there. And I'm sure they're going to have Mass Design Group as their architects. I'm sure those buildings will be well taken care of. But the Philip Register buildings are really important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard, for your comments. Question for Heather or anyone that might know this. Are any of those buildings at that campus landmark?
Chair Rios, no.
Since
none-
this is out of the historic district.
Right, a landmark structure is something with a historic status outside of the H district. And it would equate to significant status. And none of those have been landmarked, although on the work plan for the Midtown team is both an archaeological study as well as gathering information. I don't know if it's all the Philippe Register buildings, but gathering information and nomination for the historic buildings on campus. I know at a minimum, it's the Fogelson Library building as well as the Gergarsen Theater.
So anyone can nominate those. Anyone can nominate any building that they feel should be landmarked on that campus, correct?
Chair Rios, that is correct.
Thank you. Stephanie Beninato.
Thank you. Stephanie Beninato, I agree with Will's comment that the historic ordinance really does need some really deep discussion and not just have a citizen or community advisory group come up with sort of a finished product. It's very hard to find out who is even in this citizen advisory group. You can't even watch the meeting, and it's kind of up to them to decide to produce a summary of any meeting that occurs. So it seems like a little, behind the scenes. And I think that is very uncomfortable in terms of zoning and code changes, and particularly historic preservation changes. And so especially for historic, I would agree with Will that it would be good to have some study sessions as it progresses. And really, it's like a 4-year sequence. So it's going to get cleaned up, but then maybe in the second phase, then maybe some of these things will actually occur. So there is time for discussion and really to try to get some kind of consensus about how to move forward and allow development, but also honor historic preservation. I'm also very thankful that the board just passed this resolution asking the city clerk to have more full minutes, because I don't care about 1984 and 1990. There were verbatim minutes until probably about 2009. And then they went to the more full minutes, but you could tell what people were talking about and what positions they were taking. And it's not just, it's not like, oh, we're doing you a favor. Actually, in the appeal ordinance, it says that the city will comply with Rule 74 and 75, and that requires decisions that comply with court orders, which mean written, telling you what findings they're using and what evidence is used. So when you say somebody talked about X, but you don't say what they're talking about, you don't say why the board member rejected that argument or that evidence, then you are not providing a record that the district court or actually the council should be using for appeal. This might not be in some kind of resolution or open meetings act, but it is in state statute and under certain broad constitutional provisions. So I, for one, am advocating that we have better minutes, not just at this board, but at city council, because again, it also has to do with legislative record. Do you want to know who voted for what, but do you want to know why they voted for that? I would want to know that if I was going to vote for somebody for an elected position. You can't find that out because now, you could go and watch YouTube, which will take much longer than if you're flipping through, something that's more condensed. And so again, I think they're absolutely essential. I really appreciate the board passing this. And I really hope that actually it's not just for this board, that it's for city council and other land use boards so that people can actually trust the government and feel that that's transparent and accessible. So we have access to justice. This isn't an access to justice issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in this audience wishing to come forward and speak? It appears not. And anyone on Zoom?
Yes, Chair Rios, Adam Johnson would like to speak. Adam, you can unmute.
Can you hear me?
We can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, hi, Adam Johnson, Executive Director of the Old Santa Fe Association. I want to agree with Will and Stephanie's comments about the specific needs for the historic districts in the Land Development Code update. I am part of the working group, and we had a nice first meeting. For full transparency, members of that group are Marianne Maestas from Earth Care, Jesse Lawrence from the Planning Commission, Anthony Guida of the HDRB and Friends of Architecture, Johanna Gilligan of HomeWise, Jamie Cassett, who is a city councilor, Daniel Werwath of the Interfaith Housing and Housing Action Coalition, Don Miller, Santa Fe Conservation Trust, Liz Camacho, who is in the Department of Economic Development in the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and Glenn Schiffbauer, who is in the Santa Fe Green Chamber of Commerce. I would propose this to Clarion if they were here, but I think that it would be nice to have several meetings with members of the Historic Districts Review Board, because they're the people most familiar with the code and what is wrong with the code. So I just want to echo that suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Anyone else on Zoom?
No, Chair Rios.
Thank you very much. We go to staff communications. Heather, anything?
Chair Rios, we've been over what I was going to communicate with you with the
Thank you
zoning
very
code
much.
update.
We have nothing under old business, so we will proceed to the discussion item, which is located at 123 and 135 Grant Avenue. And I understand this is an informational item. Question. At the end of the discussion, do we make suggestions or do we make a motion? And are our comments binding? Attorney Rubalid or Heather or both?
Madam Chair, I believe you can make suggestions. You would not be able to take a vote because it's not on the agenda for action tonight.
So we're just going to make suggestions.
Yes, and ask
Okay.
questions. Yes.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, board members. Lisa Gavioli from Jenkins Gavin is here to share the informational item.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Mayor Weber, city staff, members of the public. I am Cody Hartley. I'm the director of the George O'Keeffe Museum. And before Lisa walks through a presentation, I wanted to start by just sharing a little bit about why we're here tonight. 26 years ago, the George O'Keeffe Museum opened to celebrate the art, life, and legacy of one of the most important artists of the 20th century, and certainly one of the most visible artists from New Mexico after a long life in New Mexico. We are very proud of our relationship with this community and with the state. We're very excited about the opportunities ahead of us to build a new museum facility worthy of our community, worthy of our history, worthy of this artist's reputation. We have dramatically outgrown our existing facilities. The facility we'll be presenting tonight gives us the resources to meet our visitors, to meet our community, to provide educational programming, to care for our collections long into the future. It also is an opportunity to open up our site to the neighborhood and the public. We are operating from a position of constant generosity. We desire to really be the best neighbors we can be, both respecting our site, respecting the history of that location, but also building for the future. I hope you will see that we have put together a very thoughtful plan and design. We're working with an amazing team of architects. I could not be happier to report that we're working with DNCA here in Santa Fe. And I'm thrilled to be able to share with you the progress we've made on this design and look forward to answering your questions. With that, I'll turn it over to Lisa.
Thanks, Cody. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Lisa Gavioli here on behalf, I'm with Jenkins Gavin Incorporated, here on behalf of the George O'Keeffe Museum. I don't know how to Sorry.
You'll have to tell me how to, or when to advance.
Oh, I was just trying to make it to go to full screen. You got it. Never mind.
What's the function for full screen?
Let's see. Can I walk you there. You just go to the menu and go down to view. And then go to full screen mode.
Okay.
Just make it show a little bit better. We're absolutely thrilled to be here with you this evening. Joined with me this evening are Jennifer Jenkins with Jenkins Gavin, the vendor contractor, DNCA Architects, Deirdre Harris, DNCA Architects, Rebecca Wood with DNCA. Also on the project team are Reed Hildebrand, the landscape architects, and John Murphy, who is the architectural historian, who's assisting us with Section 106 review. I believe he may be online listening in this evening. Excuse me, I just had a very strange fly go up my nose. We are here this evening to provide a preliminary presentation of the design for a couple of different reasons. First, to give you a sort of sneak peek as to how the design has evolved since you last saw the preliminary design 2 years ago. But also we are in the midst of a Section 106 review process for compliance with the National Historic Preservation Act. And in order for that process to keep moving, as a consulting party, as a signatory party on the eventual memorandum of agreement for Section 106 compliance, we need to hear from you guys. We need to hear your thoughts, your specific feedback about this design in order for that analysis, that assessment, that review to continue forward. And so we will be back. I'm going to go, if you could advance, Heather, that'd be great. Just to give you guys a little bit of background. I don't know if you can read that, but just to give you a little bit of background into where we are in the process of the project as a whole. In August of 2020, the Section 106 review process was initiated and the city signed on as a consulting party at that point. In July of 21, this board reviewed the historic status of the former Safeway building at 123 Grant Avenue. That building was designated as a non-contributing structure at that time. And then in August, this board received a preliminary design presentation of the conceptual design at that point for the new museum and site improvements. That following September, in September 21, the demolition of the former Safeway building at 123 Grant was approved by this board. And then in November, the Planning Commission approved the development plan for the new museum and site improvements, contingent upon, of course, approval by this board of the design. Then through the course of 2022 and so far this year, the design has really gone through some significant changes, further refining the building and site design. You'll see a lower overall building height, softer forms and masses, a more contextually sensitive design, I would say, reduced footprint overall, and importantly, an expanded public realm and a shift in the building entrance from what was formerly on the west side to the north side. And of course, DNCA will be speaking in more detail to all of these changes, but we're really excited to show you how the design has evolved. So in August and September of this year, we received the archaeological testing report for the archaeological testing that was done a couple of years ago. And this really allowed the Section 106 review to resume. And the Section 106 review is required because the project has received a challenge grant from the National Endowment for Humanities. And so that requires compliance with federal preservation laws. So NEH has now issued a determination of adverse effect based on the impacts to the archaeological resources. And that determination is made with the caveat that additional info is still needed to complete the assessment of the above ground, the impacts to above ground historic resources. So again, just restating that the purpose here this evening is to give you a preview of the design and show you how it's evolved, but also to request your feedback on the design so that can inform the analysis that John Murphy is doing with SHPO and NEH to determine any potential impacts to surrounding historic resources and to determine what mitigation measures might be needed for those. In October, we do plan to come back to you with the final design for review, and along with the demolition review for the east-west site wall, which is required to come down in order to build the museum, and a replacement in-kind request for the picket fence at 135 Grant Avenue. In October and November, we really hope to we'll be initiating consultation as part of the Section 106 process, developing the memorandum of agreement, developing the archaeological treatment plan, and refining any kind of mitigation measures that might be needed for any perceived impacts to the historic built environment. And then we are really hoping to execute that MOA by February of 24 so that the archaeological investigations and site excavations can proceed at that point. And just to reiterate this, the city will be a signatory party on that MOA. I also want to go back and mention that in December, we do plan to provide a courtesy review to the ARC of the archaeological treatment plan. So we are going to be involving the city as much as possible throughout this process as a consulting party, as a signatory party on that MOA. So I'm happy to answer questions later about that Section 106 process, but for right now, I'd like to allow Devendra and Deirdre and Rebecca to continue on with their presentation to you all.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Cody. Thank you to everyone here. This is quite an honor to be able to present this project to the city and to all of you. The intent of the presentation is we'll share the design with you. We'll share the intention behind it, where the design, how it's evolving, some of the poetics behind it, and what we want the building, how we want it to be perceived and be part of this community. You can see on that slide right there, that slide describes essentially the location. And what's important in that slide is if you look at how the building is being situated with this big garden in between it and the Bergère property. It's part of a continuum within the urban massing of what's happening with this building, the parks, the open space around it, what's happening at the federal buildings, and then the open space that connects down to the plaza. This is the design, the site plan of this building is really about connectivity and creating open spaces, park spaces for community enjoyment. And we're taking advantage of improvements that'll be happening along Sheridan Avenue to create a new pedestrian connection that we'll show you in the next few slides between the convention center, the parking coming down towards the plaza, making sure that Sheridan Avenue, which is now almost an alleyway, becomes part of the pedestrian urban landscape within the city. We can go to the next slide. So here you see the site plan where we start looking at means of, you can see the landscape. What we've done on this, in this slide, and it's not clearly legible, is we've moved the building in from all the sides to create greater setbacks. So along the alleyway, we've moved the building in, I think about 15 feet, so that the alleyway gets widened. It also becomes an area where buses can park for O'Keefe events. We've pushed the building back from on both the Grant Avenue and the Sheridan Avenue to increase the pedestrian experience along both of those streets. And the central garden space becomes an entry to both the research center to the north and to the new O'Keefe Museum to the south. So it creates a campus that is also part of the urban fabric. We've had extensive conversations on how this property, how these open spaces will perform and function during all of the events that happen down by the plaza, Indian market, Spanish market, everything. We've really been thinking about how can we provide public amenity through the site design. We can go to the next slide. So in this slide, you generally see the primary circulation, how people will be walking to the building from parking, from the plaza, and from the existing O'Keeffe Museum, which will continue to be part of the programming for the museum. Can go to the next slide. So our design process starts with an understanding of place and understanding the buildings that are around it, the tectonics of how buildings are built, the landscape, and how buildings get used. And so this slide starts to look at some of the buildings that are in the immediate vicinity that we love. And this building will respond. It's our intention for it to respond and be part of that fabric.
If I may interrupt, Member Aguilar Medrano has made a suggestion, and you may repeat your suggestion.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Heather, I was just wondering if we could remove the video portion, yes, so that the plan can be enlarged, just to make it a little bit easier for us to see. Perfect. Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you, Ben.
Working on this project is really, it's a profound honor. It's a labor of love. And I mean, who gets to work on these kind of projects? I mean, it has to be the best thing we can do for the community. And so, as we go through these slides, I'd neglected saying that, but wow. I mean, we're thrilled to be here and to be working on this project. Can go to the next slide. And at any point, if there are questions around conversations on images, happy to talk about that. So, one of our goals is to honor Miss O'Keeffe, her life, the places she worked and lived in, and how she saw the world. Part of the excitement for us to work with Miss O'Keeffe or on any art project is how it teaches us as human beings to see, how it teaches us to look at nature, the sky, relationships, social interactions. And as Cody said, Miss O'Keeffe is so dominant in how she's looked at and portrayed our landscape. Subtleties of light, softness of line, how building mass meets the sky, these are all important considerations for us. Can go to the next slide. How she depicted architecture in her paintings, the landscape, the built form, solid, void, materiality, sky. Those are all part of what we've looked at and how this design has evolved. We can go to the next slide. So these are some specific examples we looked at in looking at the design and moving it forward. We looked, of course, at the code, everything in the historic code. Chapter 14 is part of our lives. We study it, we look at it, we respond to it, but we wanted to do something that's iconic, that's of the place. And so we looked at some of the great masses, how are the other ways that you can look at Rancho State House? How do the notion of form and earth becoming building returning back to the earth, and then the geomorphic nature of mass within the New Mexico landscape. That little sketch down below is an early sketch we did related to how masses relate to fissures, how you can create fissures to bring light into a lower level because we have basement in this building. You can go to the next slide. So we have a basement that is primarily related to collection storage. And I'll go to the next slide. The floor plan is a primary for the visitors. We'll, lobby, galleries, education center, of course, a gift store, back of house, shipping, receiving. We can go to the next slide. So these are elevations that start to show the rounded masses. And I want to share with you something that's important to us, as it was to Ms. O'Keefe, was the notion of authenticity. For this building, a substantial number of the exterior walls will be built in adobe. The masses, the softness that you see on the forms are directly related to the tectonics of building in adobe. I got started in architecture. I had an Adobe stone masonry business here in the 70s and 80s. And Cecilia, I used to rent a house from you when I was an Adobe layer off on Alto Street. You may or may not remember that.
I don't remember. I barely remember what I ate this morning.
And so, this building, the design, the forms are really responding to what the tectonics of Adobe want. And so the excitement around bringing the authenticity of Adobe back into the plaza is an important part of this design. What we're looking at there on the upper, if we go back one, is the north elevation. That's a primary entry off of the garden spaces. This is a museum. So, it's museums are all about allowing natural light in controlled ways. And which is great because it allows us to really explore form. Where there are people, where it'll be occupied, of course, we have windows. Go to the next slide. So the top elevation is what the alleyway side would be. We have a lot of back of house functions there, but we still, some of the notches are about bringing natural light into the building, into the basement level where there will be curatorial staff. And the bottom slide is the elevation off of Sheridan. We can go to the next slide, please. So these are some of the renderings that you'll see. It's simple masked forms, simple soft Adobe stuccoed masses. You can see those two notches on the sides that bring light down into the basement level where there will be people. The upper level, this corner, we're looking primarily at gallery spaces. We can go to the next slide. This is that same view with some of the improvements on Sheridan for the bus shelters. You can look at the next slide. That's a corner going up Sheridan off the plaza, looking towards Sheridan and down towards the alleyway. You can go to the next slide. That's it with the bus shelters. And the next slide, please. That's looking at it as you come up Grant Avenue, off of Palace. You can see the alleyway on the side. The Oaxaca Cafe would be on your extreme right hand. You're looking, the mass in the front is a new gift store. This is a small plaza we're creating for gathering, primarily for students before they enter into the building, or it also is an entry port for the gift store. It's not the primary entry, but it is an entry. Go to the next. And so this is the looking south off of Grant Avenue, looking towards the primary entry to the building and seeing the masses of the building and how they relate to the historic Bergère property. I think that's the last slide in our deck, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank each and every one of you on this George O'Keefe team. You have given us a very thorough presentation this evening, and I'm sure board members will have comments this evening. I did like what I heard in terms of you indicating that obviously you're trying to bring the community in, you're trying to make this a space that we will be welcoming for everyone, but that you're going to have open space. What is the percentage of coverage of the buildings?
Do I have that number? What's that? 59. 59%.
59. And I also liked the fact that you're using adobe. That's wonderful. Will the corners be, in some of these instances, I'm seeing them more straight corners, but will they actually be more
They'll
rounded
be
because of
rounded.
the adobe?
Yeah, and what we're doing actually is we've worked very closely with our building envelope consultant, because doing Adobe in a building of this size, it's kind of unheard of. And for us, we want to do it right. We want to bring Adobe back into our community. This is kind of what defined northern New Mexico and Santa Fe in many ways. But so the corners will be rounded because it'll be insulated on the back side of the Adobe. So as opposed to a lot of the Adobe houses that get foamed, we want the Adobe actually to be on the outside. So the irregularities, you can't model that on a computer, but the masons and the art of the mason, I remember laying those Adobes and just having so much fun. The sculptural quality of Adobe, we want it to be present. We don't want to hide it behind 2 or 4 inches of foam.
Mhm. And would you say that this, looking at the renderings, and by the way, thank you for the renderings, it really helps us. Would you say this is wall dominated? It appears to be wall dominated.
Yes, that
kind
would
of
be accurate.
reflecting Georgia O'Keeffe's paintings in some instances.
Yeah, we wanted to do something that's iconic, that's reminiscent, but does not imitate anything. And so authenticity, we want this building to be authentic to itself, to the program and the place, the context that it's part of.
So, and what is the square footage?
About 55,000 square feet. Yeah. I have a cheat sheet here, but I'm
Oh,
bad with
yeah.
numbers, not with all the numbers.
Well, let's see if other board members have comments or questions. Board members? Member Benvenu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, it's a wonderful project. You guys have done an amazing job, I have to say. And I agree with all of the design principles that you laid out in terms of what was guiding you in this proposal. It is important that it be an iconic building. This is going to be a very important building. It's an incredibly important location, and it's an incredibly important individual that you're honoring. And it's a major museum. Also, it's a major institutional structure. So for all those reasons, I think it is important that it both pay homage to the traditions of Santa Fe, but stand out in a certain way. It just needs to. You don't want this building to disappear. So I think you've done a very nice job in all aspects of that. When I looked at the elevation drawings, my only hesitation was the battered walls seemed almost too much. They seem slightly exaggerated. I don't find that to be as true in the renderings. I don't know if that's changed at all, but maybe it was just an illusion of the elevation.
There's one, that elevation right there. And that's because we're going up to, 32 feet right there. And once we get past the 24-foot height, we wanted to step it back, but we didn't want to do a wedding cake. We wanted to batter the wall in. So that conforms to that geometry right there.
Okay. I still find that, it'd be nice to see if that really references any other buildings. That strikes me as a little unusual still, but maybe that's a good thing in this case.
Yeah,
So
and that's the only one that's doing that.
I see.
Everything else is conforming to the kind of the tectonic of how
Sure.
you'd build a adobe wall, the mass, and how it would batter up, and how you'd put bond beams on it, and how it would tie into and essentially a steel structure on the inside.
Right.
So there's tremendous complexity in figuring all that out, and we're just delighted we have it.
Yeah, absolutely. To do a project like this in Adobe is, I just congratulate you on that. That's a big
But I do need to
undertaking.
clarify, the entire building's not in Adobe.
Understood.
There's, it's primarily the exterior skin
Right.
of the building will be in Adobe.
Right. So that's, and I do think that perhaps that exaggerated batter on that one wall might actually be a good thing in this case. Again, for an iconic building, you need
Yeah.
something to stand out. Okay, so given all that, my only other concern was a little bit of how does this relate to the Bergère house? I mean, and it's fine that it contrasts with that. But are you comfortable with the way they interact with each other?
You know, we love the connectivity through the entry space, and it's primarily in the site design. If we want to go back to some of the first slides in the deck, is they connect via, well, this slide is a good, that's fine. Yeah, that one. You can kind of see they are part of a campus. Each building will, we're not trying to, as you pointed out, respect sometimes through difference. And so they connect, they define a plaza, the central garden space, and the ways in which they axially connect. It works.
Okay.
I feel it's strong and it works well.
Okay. Yeah, it was just hard for me to tell, and now I'm seeing some renderings. It's still a little difficult for me to tell if there's not some way on that, I guess, northern facade of the new building to do something that picks up some of the detailing or something along those lines.
One of the things we are doing is we are the colors will match.
Okay.
And but it's also part of what we've also looked at is not just this campus, we've looked at all the other buildings around. And so, for example, the windows are true divide. It's, it's not a one sheet of glass with mullions put behind or in front of it. So we're trying to bring, it's part of the larger urban fabric that we're looking at.
Okay. I appreciate that. And I think that's extremely important, but I also think it's very important that the Bergère house not suddenly feel awkward in the space that it's left with there, because this is a very dominating building that's being put next to it. So that's just one consideration. Lisa, were you going to say something about that?
I thank you, Member Bienvenue, and new members of the board. I just wanted to add that particular question has come up during the Section 106 review process, and particularly it was a critique of the initial design that was presented 2 years ago. And what has transpired since then is a real effort to preserve the openness of the landscape design, the sort of axial symmetry as you approach the Bergère house, and the relationship between the Bergère house and the proposed museum, and that sort of axial connection as Devendra was speaking to, and what the SHPO and John Murphy were really conveying is that in order to mitigate impacts to the Bergère house, those strategies were going to be really important: retaining the openness, preserving that axial symmetry, the picket fence, and retaining the mature plantings that are already there, the trees that are already there.
Okay. Thank you for that. Yeah, I really appreciate the fact that you're continuing to use the picket fence, which not only is on that side of the street, but on the opposite side of the street as well, and gives it a nice humble feeling to contrast with the importance of the building. So last two things, just on some detailing, you have metal gates. Are they all fenestrated? Or there aren't any solid metal gates anywhere?
No,
on the property?
they're not. They're no solid gates.
Are they going to pick up in any way the kind of metal gates that are at the existing Georgia O'Keeffe? Are they going to be similar so that you have some connectivity with that?
We're working on those designs right now, but it's a great comment, and
Okay.
we'll look forward to answering that in detail.
Because they're very distinctive, the ones
Yeah.
over there, and I think they fit in nicely with the historic building.
Thank you.
And then I guess that's all I have for now. So I appreciate your design. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Bienvenue. Other comments or questions at this time, members? Member Beachside.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate when an architect is able to share the philosophy behind the design. That's really helpful. And I was sort of struck by your comparison to to Georgia O'Keeffe's art on the outside of this building. It's when we contemplate like a significant status, we often consider the association of a building with an important person in our community, often an artist. But you never can really tell from the outside that an artist lives there. But this kind of turns that inside out, making it clear that this building is associated with an artist who's iconic in our community and the world. I love that. I think that's really cool. And I like that this particular rendering, what it shows to me, it sort of makes the point that you were emphasizing that this is part of the community. It's a building that's next to a longstanding structure, the Bergère House. It faces that house. There's, it's not sort of side by side facing away from the house. I think there's something there that makes the point that this is part of our community, something to be celebrated and something we're embracing. But yeah, I think it's beautiful, and I appreciate the description and you're coming to share it with us.
Thank you so much.
Other comments or questions, board members? It appears not. Oh, Member Guida.
And Devendra, thank you to you and your team for the beautiful presentation. I just want to kind of add my agreement that, this is a really strong project and a beautiful presentation, and the building, is an important, and specifically this design would be a great addition to the downtown fabric. I'm as compared to the previous information session that we had on this, I think, I really liked the Gluckman and the museum's idea of the open campus. I'm really glad that has been enhanced through this design, through the massing of the building and through the reconsideration of entry points and the development of that landscape between the two buildings. It's an enormous gift to the public sphere, and I really like that. I also think and really applaud the museum's decision to hire a local firm in doing this building, or kind of switching to a local firm. And I think that's played out on many levels. I think there's a lot to like about the Gluckman design and kind of where this started with some of those battered forms and the idea of making a splash with this museum. But there was also this notion that maybe some of that was a little bit pastiche. And that may have just come from the distance between New York and Santa Fe. They've done work here before, so maybe it's not that. But I think that to bring this to the conversation of authenticity, right? There's the kind of literal authenticity of being from here and kind of understanding the urban fabric. There's the authenticity of the adobe, of the way certain moves are made within that construction technology, way certain moves are made in a wall-dominated architecture, and the way that our regional style works. I think, DNCA as a firm has also kind of established a real keen ability to work with historic properties to kind of understand how to do contemporary adaptive reuse, contemporary preservation projects in that fabric with those types of buildings, and to understand that it's about more than just the kind of material or the things that we talk about a lot here, whether that's viga tips or rounded corners or depth of windows and those things that, this complies with our paint by numbers code. But I think what's most meaningful and I think authentic about the building is that it's the rare instance in a lot of our historic district projects where the design is advancing our historical styles set up here in Santa Fe, something that we did from maybe 1912 to the late 80s, but has kind of been stifled by some of the problems in our code and some of the proceedings in this room. So I'm really happy to see such an expressive and beautiful building that is so kind of respectful to the districts and all that. I think also that the kind of a dimension of that authenticity is you know, and understanding that it's not just the artifact, of course, that it's the people who use the buildings, it's the experience of being in that landscape, it's the cultural connection to the artist, to what's going to be shown in the building. And then I think for me too, the kind of biggest part is something that we don't often talk about enough in this room, which is the relationship between buildings. I think that you know, not only is the park a gift to the urban fabric, but this, you know, just the setbacks on every side of the building, making way for a plaza or a park on Grant Street, pulling back and making those our transit center so much less oppressive than it is right now, where it's just the kind of backside of a building. Those are gifts too. And the building does have a conversation with buildings across the street. It has, as you pointed out, a conversation with other structures that we like and that are very iconic in downtown. And I think also to Jennifer's point, that kind of primary conversation with the Bergier House, it's about the axial relationship between those U-shaped recesses is such a dominant feature of the project. So I'm as you can maybe tell, I'm quite enamored with the project. So congratulations. I'm really looking forward to spending time here inside the museum and in that garden as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Guida. What is the height of the building on Grant?
It steps down the tallest part, which would be the gift store portion, is 24 feet.
And on Sheridan?
On Sheridan, it's predominantly 24. There's a small corner you can kind of see on the right side that goes up to 30 feet.
And I did want to thank you for including Sheridan as part of this project. I think that's kind of helping to revive that street, Sheridan Street. And so I'm glad that you did not exclude them, but that you included Sheridan Street.
Thank you.
Member Aguilar Medrano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you guys know, I wasn't on the board the last time you guys were here, so I didn't see the first design, but when I opened the package in preparation of today's meeting, I was really excited to see the design, and I think you all have done a really nice job. I think, you know, our hopes on the board are that when we see new construction in 50 years, there are buildings that we will look back on and note them of being worthy of preservation, and that the next generation will grow up with these buildings as iconic buildings in their community. And so I think you've done a really nice job. I had one question. I love the central garden space. As Madam Chair pointed out, I think the connection to Sheridan will really help bring that street back to life. I was just curious, so is the intention of that central garden, is that open during business hours for the public to pass through? And then it's closed at the end of the day when the museum shuts down?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's a lovely connection both to the existing buildings in Sheridan. Great work, you guys.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions, board members? I heard a lot of positiveness, so that is good. Yes, Heather.
Thank you, Chair Rios. And just to provide a little more context on the Sheridan Street project, the actual bus stops will be set further in. Sheridan is going to become one way. The street width is going to be reduced. And then, of course, we're intending to put those shelters there, which are a little more opaque than, you know, the concept that was provided to us, just so that you can understand the concept and the interaction with that street.
Thank you. And I realize that this is not a formal case, but I do think it's important for public input. And I'm wondering if anyone in this room would like to come down and comment upon this project. It appears not. And anyone on Zoom?
Yes, Chair Rios. Stephanie Benenato would like to speak.
Okay, and Stephanie, and we do limit public comment, to 2 minutes. So if you can help me, Melissa.
Thank you.
Stephanie.
Stephanie Benenato, PO Box 1601, Santa Fe, New Mexico. I appreciate the softness of this very massive building. I am a little, I feel like the entrances are so set back that they're almost invisible, and it makes the mass of the walls really come forward. And I know it's a museum, and so you don't want necessarily a lot of light into it. But I don't see anything really of that scale or that kind of mass, blank wall massiveness, really in any other building. And I also, although one drawing looks like there's a lot of garden space, another drawing looks like it's going to be a lot of walkway. So I'm just curious about that, because we've had other public entities say they're going to create a garden and then they plant one tree, like the New Mexico Museum Foundation over on at the Eugenie Chenard House. So I just like to make sure there really are gardens. It's not all going to be hard landscape or hard surface. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else on Zoom?
No, Chair Rios.
Okay. Well, thank you, team, and good luck to you, and we'll see you again in the future.
Thank you, guys. We really appreciate your feedback, and we will be back October 24th.
Thank you. We have nothing under old business, and we have 3 cases under new business. And I already indicated that we'll have a 2-minute limit for public speakers. And I do need to tell you that you do have the option to appeal if you disagree with the decision this board renders this evening. And you have 15 days after the findings and conclusions have been approved and adopted. With that being said, we'll go to the first case this evening, which is Lanny's case. It's located at 1150 Cristo Rey Street. Lanny, you have the floor.
They're playing your song.
I'm not sure I like it. Okay, good evening, Madam Chair and board members. This is case 2023-007286 HDRB for 1150 Cristo Rey Street, requesting primary facade designation. Next slide, please. The property at 1150 Cristo Rey is located on the south side of Cristo Rey Street, just to the west of Canyon Road and across from the parking area at Cristo Rey Church. Next slide, please. The property at 1150 Cristo Rey is a single-family residence listed as contributing to the downtown and east side historic district and is part of the Tafoya compound, which reached south to Camino San Acacio. Next slide, please. The Tafoya compound is located between Camino San Acacio and Cristo Rey. The compound has defining characteristics, including textured stucco and stone parapets, which are located on several structures in the compound. Another feature of the area are the low stone yard walls and retaining walls. 1150 Camino San Acacio is a clear representative of the properties of the Tafoya compound. Next slide, please. The residence is a New Mexico vernacular style with a flat roof, stone parapets, 2 chimneys, and vinyl windows. The walls are not vinyl. The next slide, please. The east facade holds a ceramic tile panel and shows the original structure stone parapet. Next slide, please. There is an enclosed portal addition on the north facade, which is believed to be from the late 1960s and is currently referred to as the Great Room. The enclosed portal section mimics the original stone parapet. Next slide, please. An attached carport was constructed at an unknown later date, and the south portion of the structure is located within the hill. Next slide, please. The western side parapets of this structure appear to have been repaired at an unknown date, as concrete obscures any stone in the parapet. All the windows were replaced to vinyl windows in 2009 under permit 58, and the coyote fence courtyard area was permitted in 2010 under Permit 781. The residence was most recently restuccoed in 2021. Next slide, please. There is a high stone wall with stone buttresses along the street frontage, and concrete block steps run along the east yard wall of the driveway. These steps are covered in the gravel from the driveway and difficult to distinguish from the driveway itself. However, I will note that the driveway has had asphalt applied within the past month, so these features are no longer visible. We were walking on asphalt today. The eastern lot line is established with a stucco and wrought iron fence that matches the neighbor's lot. Next slide, please. The further west portion of the lot has a mostly abandoned gravel driveway. The foundation for an abandoned guest house construction and the retaining wall is constructed of railroad ties. The area is covered in vegetation. Next slide, please. No previous case files are on record for the property in the Historic Preservation Office. The applicant is requesting primary facade designation on this primary residential structure, on this contributing residential structure. Next slide, please. Staff recommends that due to the unique features of the stone-treated parapets, the primary facades of this structure be the original eastern facade of the residence, which excludes the enclosed portal on the northern end and the non-historic windows of the facade per section 14-5.2C designation of significant and contributing structures. I stand for questions.
Thank you. So Lanny, excuse me, repeat what you're recommending as primary.
The original eastern facade.
Original eastern. And you are including the walls as part of this case as well?
Yes,
And
that's the only section of the original building that does not have an addition on it at this point.
and what was your recommendation on the walls?
The eastern original portion.
Okay, so everything is
Wait, as she's saying of the building, not of the
Of the
yard
building.
wall, right? You're not recommending the yard wall for status?
It was not part of my staff report. No.
Thank you.
Member Aguilar Patrón.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A quick clarification, because I just heard that you're only recommending the original east portion of the wall. But on our site visit, isn't E1 indicated in blue here also part of your recommendation?
It was not, but it is part of the eastern facade.
Okay,
That's,
so you're,
that's the part of the addition that was built in 1967.
okay, I thought that was, that you said today that you were including that part because it was still older than 50 years, but it's just the red one.
Right.
Okay.
The original portion is the red and then the addition is the blue portion. And I was only recommending the red.
Okay, thank you.
And do you have the elevations that you can put up on the screen?
I don't know which one, I don't have drawings. They're just the photos. Is that what you want?
Yes.
Okay, so that would be slide 6. Heather? So that's
Any
the
other-
east facade.
Oh, excuse me, Lanny. Any other questions for Lanny at this time? No questions. Applicant or applicants, please come forward.
You swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Richard Martinez, PO Box 925, Santa Fe, New Mexico. We agree with the what is recommended by the staff. I want to point out, if we could go back to the plan that has your recommended there, that one, right there. So if you can, oh, I'm sorry. Right there, okay. If you can see, the great room is on the top of this drawing. And in the great room, you can see that there are 2 nichos surrounding an open doorway that steps up in the house. I believe, though I don't have authentication of it, I believe that those nichos represented where windows were originally, and that the door was originally the front door. And so that when that portal was enclosed, then a new front door was created. And so that the front door as it exists now is not the original front door. The neighbor has given a letter, Mr. John Tafoya, and in this letter, he says that that my parents, Richard and Flora Tafoya, built the house over a long period of time. This was a very common practice for couples whose extended families lived in Santa Fe for many generations. And so it was always sort of added to, and things were changed, which was typical for this neighborhood and for the Santa Fe in general. So it's very difficult, I think, to find a contributing facade of the house. You know, it is contributing, of course. It's just that much of it has been changed over the years. And so I agree, and we agree with the southern portion of the eastern facade as primary. And the yard walls, the retaining walls, the stone walls, really beautiful. I think that's one of the very contributing parts of the house as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Any questions for Richard, board members? Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, Richard.
Hi.
So you agree with staff's recommendation, the kind of older portion of the east facade, excluding the front door that's set within it?
Well, the way that the red is put, it excludes the front door because that's in the blue.
Oh, I see. They use the portal, the enclosed portal entry as the front door. So, and then as far, I know we're also going to exclude the electrical service panel and service drop and all the GAC that's on that facade. Any comments about the openings that are on the red facade? I think the best photo of this is the one that's in winter.
I would exclude the windows themselves because they've been changed so often.
Yep.
And I think they hopefully will continue to evolve.
Okay.
Yes.
Good to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Guida. Any other questions, board members? Member Benvenu? Oh, I thought you were moving to speak. No. Anyone from the public wishing to speak on this project? We have John Eddy coming forward.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state your name and address for the record.
John Eddy, number 14 Avenida Campo Verde, Santa Fe. Thank you, Madam Chair, board members. I agree with everything that's been said thus far, and I very strongly agree that the walls are very, very important on this property, probably the most important thing. But I also am glad that staff brought up the parapets that have been treated in this way. And this is, as I read it, it's a vernacular adaptation that was done on this property. And it's really interesting because it's kind of a territorialization of those parapets that they did to try to strengthen and maintain the adobe character and protect it from erosion, which is how the territorial style came about with bricks on top of parapets. So it's people in the neighborhood trying to protect their house by embracing an adaptation that was brought in when more money was available for people to build houses. They could buy brick. These people did it with stone. in this instance. And I can't tell really from the pictures how well done this actually was from an aesthetic point of view, but I find it a very important part of the history of that neighborhood that these folks tried to protect their house that way. So I think that's also something that should be carefully considered as staff brought up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ade. Anyone else in this audience wishing to speak on this project? No one else? Anyone on Zoom?
Yes, Chair Rios, Stephanie Benenato. Stephanie, you may unmute.
Thank you very much. Yes, I appreciate that you've talked about the walls themselves. I think they're really important in the character of this property and that they should be given some kind of status. I also think that if you're going to use the east facade as a primary facade, I don't understand why you wouldn't include the 1967 part. It is well more than 50 years old. And so I don't understand why it should be left out of that primary facade designation. And if the window openings are the same or similar, very similar to what was there, then I would wonder, I mean, I can see that you could replace the windows because they're not historic, but I would hope that the openings themselves would be, the size of them would be maintained. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa, did you swear her in? Yeah, that's.
Sorry. Stephanie,
Yeah.
I didn't swear you in. Do you
Okay.
swear, yeah, do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony that you just gave is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Please state your address for the record.
PO Box 1601, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87504.
Okay, thank you.
Heather, thank you, Melissa. Heather, anyone else on Zoom?
Chair Rios, no.
Okay. Richard, did you have something else?
No.
Member Aguilar Madrona.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was almost ready to make a motion, but my only hesitation with the blue portion of the east facade is that during our site visit, a couple of us noted how well the stone parapet matched the southern portion of that facade, even though it was, I'm assuming, also constructed in the 60s at a different time. But I wouldn't want to designate that as primary and limit what you can do in terms of changing the openings. I think it makes sense to exclude the windows and the doors. I'm just curious, Richard, do you have any thoughts about that parapet on the eastern facade on the northern portion?
Yes, this is my personal feeling about the parapet, the stone parapet. I believe that it was added rather late in this for this house. It doesn't seem like it was. I think that the stone was added late 60s or early 70s, something like that. It doesn't seem that it was that much of a part of the house before that. And so it's an interesting part of the house, but it's not necessarily very beautiful part of the house. And so I'm less concerned with that, but of course we're going to, that will be kept. And I am planning, if there's anything, if there's any addition to the house, that would also have the stone as a feature of it. But it doesn't seem to me, I think the part that's the reason the part of the facade is interesting has more to do with just the overall adobe nature of the house, and not necessarily contingent on that parapet. I mean, on that stone on top of the parapet.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for your input.
Yes, Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple comments and maybe towards a kind of rational designation in this case. I when this was first presented, I questioned the contributing status of the house at all. It's being covered up by a very large great room addition. that was, that was once a portal and then got filled in and has a bunch of, casement windows from the 80s in it. And, it's, there's not a whole lot there when we think about contributing. And of course, we have this problem. We don't have a defined period of significance. We do for the districts, and that, that should be kept in mind when we think about what contributes to a district. But, for my money, the portion of the 1967 facade, just because it's old, is not good enough for a primary designation on the contributing building. I would agree with the older portion of the facade, with the exclusion of the window and door material, noting that the openings may be historic. And as loath as I am to designate status to yard walls, I think in this case it's worthwhile. The retaining wall at the street, especially in combination with the stone parapets, is a feature that does contribute something to the neighborhood, that does speak to the period in which these homes were constructed, and the way in which they were constructed. And so to leave it out seems to me to be, hard to do in this case. That's my 2 cents on
Thank you,
status.
Member Guida. If there are no further comments? Yes. Member Aguilar.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I thought you were asking for a motion.
I am.
Okay. Okay. In case number 2023-007286 HDRB, I move to designate the southern portion of the east facade as primary, excluding the non-historic windows and the non-historic doors. I would also add to designate the northern stone yard wall as contributing, as well as the matching stone wall on the southern end of the carport. And I would also note that any wall-mounted utilities are excluded as well.
Is there a second to this motion?
I second the motion.
Is there anything further to add to the motion? Nothing further. Roll call vote, please.
Member Baldo,
Yes.
Member Aguilar Madrano,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue,
Yes.
Member Beachside,
Yes.
Member Guida,
Yes.
Member Mather.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. Next case is Ramon's, and it's located at 802 Don Cubero.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. This is indeed 802 Don Cabrero Avenue. Case has a status review and a request for primary facade designations to inform future renovations. The image you're seeing here is taken from 1985, the oldest historical cultural properties inventory form that we have. Next slide, please. Seen here outlined in red is the location in the western, it's on the very western edge of Don Gaspar area historic district, east of Don Diego Avenue at the intersection of West Buena Vista Street and Don Cubero. Now I can see the next one. This 1930 Sanborn Fire Insurance Company map sitting on a corner lot. This structure was built in the 1920s and altered with window replacements, window sills, and opening sizes sometime in the 1990s. The house is a hollow penitentiary tile, and faces east onto Don Cabrero. It's kind of a mixed Spanish eclectic Pueblo revival style house. that encloses approximately 2,900 square feet, including a finished basement. The property also has low walls, a non-historic carport, and a two-car garage that was built at the same time as the original house that is also designated as contributing. So here you can see the original garage and the house. This is just for context because we looked at this case recently. This is 407 West Buena Vista Street. It's directly north of the property that we're looking at now. It was erected about the same time in 1920. And this property was heard before the board on 9/12/2023 with primary facades designated as the south and the west. But kind of characteristic of this architecture is that kind of bat-winged and sculptural parapets, which this 802 shares. Can we advance the slide? Okay. This is a 1969 aerial that shows the main residence and the garage circled in red. And I'm also in the slide, I'm pointing out in yellow are the site walls. Okay. This is the 1982 historical property inventory form photograph. Circled, windows circled represent several changes. The removal of the original wood multi-light casements and replaced that have been since replaced with aluminum sliding units, the alteration of the rough window opening dimensions, and the placement of the windows deeper into the wall, creating a kind of an exaggerated reveal recess. On the left is the east facade of the camera facing northwest. On the right is the north corner facade with the camera facing southeast, southwest. The contributing garage is original to the property. And, you know, the bat wing and step parapets are consistent with the main residence. The carport addition that you can see to the left with the arched windows was added sometime in maybe in the 90s. And the garage doors that we looked at today, and in my opinion, they're historic if they're not original, but I recommend including them in the primary facade designation. So staff recommends the historic status of the main residence and the garage be maintained as contributing to per 14-5.2C designation of significant and contributing structures. Staff further recommends that the street walls that define the east and the north frontage of the property also be designated as contributing. And staff recommends that the following facades be designated as primary. On the main residence, the east facade facing Don Cabrero Avenue and the north facade facing West Buena Vista, excluding the non-historic windows. And also including the north facade on the original garage, the original contributing garage. Does anybody have any further questions?
Thank you, Ramon. Any questions for Ramon at this time, board member? Member Aguilar Madrano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ramon, I'm just curious, this is a bit of a side note, but we noticed on the site today that there is a vehicular gate and a pedestrian gate that match steel. And I was noticing in the packet that in 2017, the applicant said that they were proposing a wood and steel vehicular gate. So when you were reviewing the case, at what point did that design change and was it approved?
I wish I had an answer for you on that. I don't know.
Okay. Okay. That's all for now, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Will the applicant or applicants, who is the applicant? Their applicant, please come forward. The only person reading.
Go ahead and swear you in. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Florian Griego. And my work at business address is 9245 South Farmer Avenue, Suite 112 in Tempe, Arizona.
Thank you.
And I believe the homeowner was going to try to be on. Zoom. Should make it.
Good evening, sir.
Sorry.
I said, good evening.
Good evening.
Do you agree with staff's recommendations?
It is my understanding that the homeowner does agree with the staff recommendations.
Okay. And did you have anything further to tell us or to add?
I do not.
Board members, do you have questions or comments for the applicant? No questions or comments? Anyone in the audience wishing to comment on this particular project? I don't see anyone. Anyone on Zoom?
Yes, Chair Rios, Stephanie Benenato.
And
May I-
Stephanie has been sworn in. Yes, Stephanie.
I just hope that you will go with staff recommendations. Stephanie Benenato, PO Box 1601, Santa Fe, New Mexico. I hope you will go with staff recommendations. I think that the house is in a really good example of a particular type of architecture that was done in that neighborhood. And in South Capitol, you see many parts where, you know, somebody bought like 4 lots and the houses are similar and then they change. And I think this is part of just an example of that small kind of development that occurred in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on Zoom?
No, Chair Rios.
Thank you, Heather. Board members, I will entertain a motion, please. Member Bichai.
Hi, I just have a question for Ramon. The HDRB report refers to the lower portions of the street walls as historic. Can you show us what those are? It's a pretty low wall as it is. I'm just not sure I understand what the lower portion refers to.
Let me see if we can get visuals pulled up here. But the HDRB report mentions that the western portion of the site wall that I'm suggesting should be contributing at a higher height than what was originally built. But the continuous nature of that wall, I think, I don't see the importance of designating the most western portion of that wall, which is relatively new, I would guess like to 80s, maybe. The continuous nature of that northern boundary of the site wall, I thought was not important to designate it as non-contributing in relation to the rest of the site wall, I guess. I hope I answered your question.
So to be clear, are you recommending only the eastern yard wall?
The eastern and northern boundaries. Heather, if we can go back to the recommendation slide, which is at the last slide. So at the driveway entrance, which is on the north side, there's that small portion of wall that is a little bit higher and was of more recent vintage. But the continuous nature of the wall itself, I think, adds a contributing aspect to the street frontage and should not be not considered contributing, but as more of a continuation of that boundary wall.
Sorry, the north wall is on the street, yes.
It's a corner lot. So we have the east wall, which is approximately 46 inches high, and then a small portion of the north wall to the west, just west of the driveway, which is of a more recent vintage and a higher height. But the visual impact of that boundary site wall that I'm recommending to be contributing, I think, is intact with the overall visual representation of the site.
Got it. Thank you for the clarification.
Any other questions? If not, I will entertain a motion, please. Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ramon, very nice presentation, very thorough and good recommendations. Case 2023-007-313 HDRB 802 Don Cubero. I move that the facades in agreement with staff recommendations, the contributing status is maintained. The north facade of the garage, the north facade of the house, the east facade of the house are primary, as well as contributing status for the east yard wall and the north yard wall, excluding the gates and excluding the extra height that was added towards the western portion of that wall.
Do I hear a second?
Beach, I will second, and with a friendly amendment that with respect to the east facade of the primary residence, that the window openings and door openings consistent with the HICP are not historic and should be excluded.
Yes, thank you. And that's true of the north and the east facades of the house, right?
Yes.
Yes, sorry,
Okay.
both facades, yes.
So accepted as friendly and noting that the window and doors in the openings are non-historic.
Any other additions to this motion? None being, yes, Ramon, did you have?
I would like, Madam Chair, thank you. Member Bishai and John, Mr. Bienvenu, was there consideration on those garage doors themselves?
I would include them in the motion.
As contributing?
Yeah, that was my intent. Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification.
That's what I gathered. Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
member Bienvenu,
Yes.
member Beachside,
Yes.
member Guida,
Yes.
member Mather,
Yes.
member Valdo.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Madam Chair,
Thank you very much. Yes,
make a
member.
comment? On the Ramon, I'd like to ask staff to report back, to investigate and report back as to whether the steel gate, the steel pedestrian gate were ever approved by this board at the next meeting, and that appropriate action be taken if they were not approved.
Understood. Will do.
Thank you.
Thank you. The last case this evening is also Ramon's case, and it's located at 551 Canyon Road.
Because of our new carpeting and stuff, we're having like a technological challenge here. But this is 551 Canyon Road, and this is a case that we recently heard, I think it was on the 13th. What you're seeing displayed here is Dorothy Newkirk Stewart's block print that was created on the premises. Case 2023007315. 551 is just north of Canyon Road and is located west of Camino Escondido. The structure is outlined in red, and the applicant now requests window replacements and repairs, exterior stair repair, replacing skylight glazing, and the addition of a mini split HVAC system. This is an apartment and studio space in Santa Fe vernacular style, and the status was designated as significant in case 202300777165 HDRB on September 12th. At that hearing, the non-historic windows at the north and west and the wrought iron security screens were excluded from this designation. It was erected in approximately 1945, roughly 1,500 square feet. Adobe structure once held a studio and art gallery. the first art gallery on Canyon Road, and was a cultural gathering place that was run by the artist and printmaker Dorothy Newkirk Stewart. As I pointed out in our last hearing, the architecture is kind of a unique typology. The entry vestibule dividing the workshop and the gallery. And the integration of the space within the slope of the site is also a defining characteristic of this building. This is the west elevation with the camera facing northeast. You can see the industrial skylight that illuminated the workshop area on this kind of roofscape right here. The wrought iron gates lead to the entry courtyard, and to the right is the original workshop, and to the left is the gallery space. The entry courtyard. This is again the entry courtyard, and this are showing the stairs revised for code reasons and to makes access more readily available. Again, the entry courtyard. This is the north elevation that kind of goes into that main gallery space that the windows were considered not part of the significant status of the building, and which the applicant is proposing to replace. And the east elevation, again, with the windows that were considered not part of the significant status, and which for egress purposes, they would like to replace. There's a small window down here to your lower left that is going to be refurbished. And let's see if we can get a big enough image here for you guys to see this. So the entry courtyard, which faces west, that's where the stairway is going to be replaced. The two windows to the north are going to be replaced. And I'll let Richard talk a little bit more about the details of those. And on the eastern facade, there's those three windows again for egress purposes. And also a split system, mini split system that will be shielded with a coyote fence. I think it's about 4 feet high. Important to note that those windows in that entry courtyard are going to be refurbished, so they won't be replaced. The existing and proposed north elevations on the left and the existing and proposed east elevations on the right. So no real modifications to the opening sizes. And the windows, I understand, even though I don't have specifications yet, but wood true divided lights. And the finishes will match the existing. So staff recommends approval of the proposed project and finds that the application complies with section 14-5.2D, general design standards for all historic districts, 14-5.2E, downtown and east side standards, and 14-5.2C, regulation of significant and contributing structures in the historic districts.
Thank you, Ramon. You're done? Any questions for Ramon? You feel with these changes, the building will still remain significant? Thank you.
Yes. Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Martinez, you've already been sworn in. Tell us what you know about this project.
Yes, I have. Thank you. Thank you very much. We want to touch as little as possible this beautiful building, but we need to make it a coherent house. Right now, you go through the bedroom into the kitchen, for instance. So I'm proposing that we move the kitchen into the studio, but in a way that it doesn't reach the ceiling, that it just sits against the wall and it makes the most modest intrusion into that room. And then I also propose that we make additions to the bath and the closet as well, but in a way that keeps the existing windows, and the additions do not go to the ceiling. They just go to an 8-foot height. And so the ceiling continues above them, just like it does with the additions or the cabinetry that is installed right now that will no longer be installed. This bathroom will replace. The cabinetry was not part of the original workshop and studio. It was an attempt to make this sort of function as a bedroom. And so we're going to take that out and replace it with an expanded bathroom, which has a shower, and with closets, which replace the kitchen where it is right now, and keep the windows. I also propose to replace the skylights in those rooms. Now, in my proposal, I said to only replace the glass of the skylights, but in my discussions and coordination with the skylight manufacturers, one of the problems is that the metal frames that exist right now for those skylights would condense water. They would be cold, and they would rain down on the furniture down below, the people down below as well. So we would like to replace the skylights, but in the same configuration with the glass, with insulated glass rather than the wire glass, which exists right now. Those skylights, as you can see, were covered up quite significantly to make sure, because one of them sits over the bedroom area. And then the windows that I would like to replace are the non-historic windows. Some of them are actually door panels. The ones in the studio are actually door panels that were put in there at some point a few years ago. I don't know, 2000 or something like that. I need to make sure that there's egress out of the building, and for fire and things like that. So the bedroom, which is has windows on the east side, and the studio space, which has the windows on the north side, would be replaced. The other windows are really beautiful, and we plan to restore those windows. The stairway in the courtyard is intended to meet current regulations. So there's a landing so that you don't come in the doors right now, those metal gates, and have to walk down immediately at irregular risers. And so I'm planning a stairway that sits in the space, that doesn't go all the way to those beautiful mud plastered walls, so that we maintain those as much as possible. So this new stairway just sits inside as a freestanding object that doesn't touch the existing building at all. I stand for questions.
Thank you, Richard. Questions or comments? Board members? No questions or comments? Anyone in the audience wishing to comment in reference to this particular case? No one? Anyone on Zoom?
Yes, Chair Rios, Stephanie Benenato. You
Okay.
may unmute.
Thank you, Stephanie Benenato. I appreciate the design changes that are being suggested here. I think they're in keeping with the building. I'm just disappointed in losing that little staircase, but I can understand that. And I think it is a good idea if it's a new staircase, not to touch a historic wall. I see that the north proposed facade looks slightly different than the existing facade. I'm kind of wondering why. And then I like the idea that they're going to refurbish several of those windows. So thank you very much for trying to maintain this building as a significant contribution to our town.
Thank you, Stephanie. Anyone else on Zoom?
No, Chair Rios.
I will entertain a motion, board members, if you have nothing further. Member Guida.
Richard, thank you for presenting a really nice project. I think it's really smart and sensitive to the significant building. Case 2023-007315 HDRB 551 Canyon Road. I move that the board approve the project as submitted.
Do I hear a second?
Aguilar Madrano will second.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Bienvenue,
Yes.
Member Bichai,
Yes.
Member Guida,
Yes.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Valdo,
Yes.
Member Aguilar Medrano.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you both. Thank you, Richard. Next, we go to matters from the board. Anything, board members, that you want to express at this moment? Member Guido, you have
Thank you, Madam Chair.
1 minute.
I feel the need to express myself on a few topics. I have three, couple questions for staff and then one point. The findings of fact and conclusions of law, we've talked about this before. I know that the date of the hearing is in each of the findings of fact. It becomes challenging, as we saw tonight and have seen before, for board members to approve findings of facts and conclusions of law that either they haven't read, but most likely because they weren't here at the hearing. And I'm asking again if staff can simply organize them into chunks by hearing date. I think we can keep track of when we were here and when we weren't. And if we can just kind of go through them in that way and say, okay, well, this is from this date, these three are from this date, these two are from the other. I think we can have a much more efficient process. I hate to add work and process to things, but I think in terms of fairness to the board members and especially to the applicants, I think we should be doing that.
Chair Rios, Member Guido, we can certainly accommodate that request. Thank you. I realized that when you all were voting that a couple of you abstained, and I was like, oh, well, there were a couple of these hearings, but you can't tell on the agenda. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Member Guido?
I want to finish my
Okay.
two other things, if you don't mind. Heather, last time you mentioned that the text amendment for the exceptions is being presented or at least introduced at City Council tomorrow. Is that right?
Chair Rios, Member Guida, yes, that is correct. A couple of changes or updates were being made to the format today, so I hope it got on the agenda. As
Okay.
of now, it's on the agenda.
Is there public comment with this or is it just being introduced?
It's just the introduction.
Okay.
It is on the agenda or it is not?
I will double check,
Okay.
but it's supposed to be on the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
And will there be the opportunity for public comment on it or? I mean, I know you said us to go to another committee and then come back to the City Council. That's when there would be public comment.
Right. So the process is that it's introduced to the council and then at a subsequent hearing, public comment is solicited on that particular item at council. And then it will have to be heard by this board as well as Quality of Life Committee, and then come back to council where additional public comment can happen.
So maybe another year.
My
For the
term
last-
date is November 8th.
Okay.
So it's going to be very fast because provided that tomorrow night it's introduced, then there's a series of public meetings that will held. Gary and I will collaborate to make sure things happen. So it's my hope that on October 24th, we'll be able to review the text of the amendment.
Thank you both. I know it's been a long road. And then the last third item I have, and Madam Chair, thank you for indulging me. Just reflecting a little bit on some of the public comment that we had at the beginning of the hearing. I think we covered, and Heather covered a lot of this kind of setup in all of this. But I didn't want to ignore Will McDonald's point about, I think the point that he was trying to make about the values that guide the historic ordinance. And so, you know, it's clear that the city is now engaged in a process of a Chapter 14 land use development code update that's to zoning, the tool with which we implement our plans and values and all of that. This was all part of a process that 2 land use directors ago, Carol Johnson started over the need to revisit long-range planning, something that the city of Santa Fe hasn't done in over 2 decades. And still doesn't have a consultant or yet engaged. We have a plan to do it, but I think there's been rightly some frustration over the revisions to the tool coming before the revisions or kind of entering into a planning process. The city has a plan for those things to catch up. We understand that, you know, there is some value in cleaning up the existing code right now. But I take Will McDonald's point very seriously, that, you know, some reflection about the nature of the code, the bigger picture, the values of what guides us, whether that be a preservation plan, whether that be a kind of style discussion, not only in the historic districts, but also with our point system throughout the city, that those kinds of discussions about like what is guiding development in the biggest picture, in the biggest sense, and how it matters to citizens is planning. It's not zoning. We can make tweaks when we're going through these things, and ultimately, once we enter kind of phase 3 of the zoning rewrite, there will be a general plan update that will be responding to, but it's a long road. This point about having those discussions and them needing to happen, not within the framework of a zoning cleanup, but rather in a kind of broader picture, is well taken, at least for me.
Yeah, I agree with those comments that Will made as well, and thank you for reiterating them. Anybody else? Yes, Heather.
Thank you, Chair Rios. Just to respond to a couple of things. Clarion Associates and actually Matt Goebel back in 2002 drafted a cleanup of the Historic Districts Ordinance, which was never adopted. So certainly I can email that to the board so that you can see what the work that was done in the early 2000s, what was done, and being considered as to why it lost momentum and never was adopted. I am uncertain. So, but certainly that might be a point for departure in this particular case.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, our next meeting is Tuesday, October the 24th, 2023, and it's set for regular time, 5:30, correct? And I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Aguilar Medrano so moves.
And do I hear a second? And roll call vote, please.
Member Beachside?
Yes.
Member Guida?
Yes.
Member Mather?
Yes.
Member Baldo?
Yes.
Member Aguilar Medrano?
Yes.
Member Bienvenu?
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. And just FYI, I am going to be out of Santa Fe from November the 11th through December the 11th. I'm just going to go visit one of my daughters in Austin, spend Thanksgiving and trying to talk my San Francisco daughter to join us. So, familia.